So Foundations was the most recent set. Before that, we had Duskmorn, Duskmorn House of Horrors, which was the 90s horror genre themed set. And that also had an alchemy release, but I don't know any of the alchemy cards because I have not played since alchemy started, really, because I didn't like the alchemy set, didn't like the mechanics, which is why I'm going to focus on draft wherever I can. Before Duskmorn House of Horrors, we had Bloomburrow, which was a Redwall kind of inspired. Play Lorcana instead. I don't think Lorcana has a good online client at all, whereas this is actually like well formatted. Also, welcome RitualNet. If we had a Lorcana arena, I definitely would play Lorcana instead, because although I do love Magic the Gathering, I also really like the Lorcana game. And for anyone who's unfamiliar, it is Disney Lorcana. Yes, I'm a massive shill to Disney. Not really. I'm just a mouse. Don't even worry about it. But yeah, Bloomburrow was a Redwall-esque cute animal themed set. If I jump into the collection here, it's not going to be set specific. The collection is just the collection of cards that I have. Can I filter it by a category? Yeah. I filter it to Bloomburrow cards. Oh, we have no Bloomburrow cards. There we go. You've got like adorable mice and rabbits and little hamsters, although I think that's the only hamster card in the set. There's birds and bats and raccoons and frogs. Marp. And rats. Well, they are still very cute ratties. Look at them. And otters. Oh. Yeah, it was a very cute set. Before Bloomburrow, we had Modern Horizons 3, which I didn't think would be in... I guess it had to be. It wasn't a Commander format, even though it seemed very much like a Commander format with the amount that it gave. Mousetraps. Disney MTG. I mean, we're getting Marvel MTG, so that's Disney affiliated. The same thing, right? With the Spider-Man set that's coming out this year. Next year. It's still 2014. It's coming out in the next year. There we go. Before Modern Horizons 3, which was not a standard format, hence modern. We had Outlaws of Thunder Junction, which again had an alchemy set. And yeah, I actually have cards for this one. So it seems like the tutorials give you a bunch of these sets, but none of the three most recent ones, which is nice because it means you can collect those up from scratch. Outlaws of Thunder Junction was loosely themed on like Western films, like cowboys and Indian, well, cowboy films, like Clint Eastwood style, but set in more Magic the Gathering. Modern Housewives MTG. The only way is Essex MTG. Yep, eventually we will get there. I don't know if everyone's heard, but on the news of silly MTG formats that are coming out, we are getting SpongeBob SquarePants. So I think that's just going to be a secret lair, but it is quite funny that you could fight Patrick Starfish in Magic the Gathering. So you could have like Murders of Karlov Manor, a serious murder mystery set, which had like a Clue sub-game that you could play, which had its own like the Clue characters in Magic the Gathering versions with their own cards. You could play like a serious murder mystery with cowboys and cute little animals and weird eldritch 90s horror things against SpongeBob and Spider-Man. Then before Murders, we had the return to Khans of Tarkir, taps to do 20 damage to your face. SpongeBob SquarePants. Exactly. We had Cards of Tarkir Remastered, which was mostly to bring Cards of Tarkir back onto Entity Arena because they took it off for a while. It was the set that got started on here, and then they removed it because it went out of standard. But then they brought all the cards back, so we've got it back. Before that, we had Lost Caverns of Ixalan, which is the dinosaur-themed set. I believe the main factions are dinosaurs, pirates, merfolk, and vampires? No, the vampires are... No, vampires. Pirates and vampires are not the same thing. Pirates were mostly human pirates, but also some other races. And then the vampires were like conquistador-themed. Because there's a lot of Aztec Mesopotamia sort of themings. Vampire conquistadors! Yeah! Before Lost Caverns of Ixalan, we had the Wilds of Eldraine, which was grim fairy tale styled stuff. So I love that Standard currently has Wilds of Eldraine and Bloomburrow in it, because it means you can mix adorable little animals with fairy tales. And it's amazing and beautiful and wonderful. And then you can fight detectives and cowboys with them. It's kind of silly. The current Standard format is very funny in that they are all very kind of iconic themes to the sets. And then we go further back, and speaking of Magic the Gathering crossovers with other things, we had the Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth set. So you can fight SpongeBob and Spider-Man with Frodo Baggins, if you want to. Before that, we had the big story plot point of the Phyrexian invasion, which, if you were here for the first little start of my stream, I mentioned the Omen Paths. This was where we had that sort of jump in story where it was like, Planeswalkers are no longer important because the Phyrexians have ripped the multiverse asunder, and people can now just kind of walk across the Omen Paths to different planes of existence. You don't have to be a Planeswalker to travel the multiverse. This sort of started with... I like that that's just Alchemy Phyrexia. It was March of the Machines, for the most part. Is there more to the collection? There is more to the collection. Good. So, yeah, the Phyrexian invasion plot was sort of throwing little hints out through a lot of these older sets. But it started to kick off in Dominaria United, where Ajani was corrupted by the Phyrexian invasion and was a sleeper agent the entire time. Maybe the entire time? Some amount of the entire time. And Teferi went back in time to the Brothers' War, which is the battle between Mishra and Urza, who are very old characters in the story. Battled them. Then the Phyrexian invasion, Phyrexia All Will Be One, happened. And then it went, we'll ignore Shadows over Innistrad Remastered, it went to March of the Machines with the Phyrexian symbol there, which was, despite being in X-Men font, every time I look at it I'm like, that's the X-Men font, surely that's just the X-Men font. Very similar. It was the main cast of Planeswalkers versus the Phyrexians trying to stop their invasion, and for the most part they did, which we then got March of the Machines Aftermath to be like the tiny little set that gives, as you can tell by the number of cards in it, there's barely 50 cards. But that was Wolverine versus Phyrexians. Yep. If they put the secret layers in here, you could do Wolverine versus Elesh Norn. But yeah, so that was the main story there. We also have Streets of New Capenna, which is a great set. Based on like Gangs of New York sort of thing. We have Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, based on like a Neo Tokyo in-universe. We have Innistrad Crimson Vow and Innistrad Midnight Hunt that were vampire and werewolf dominated sets on the Innistrad plane, which is their like gothic horror plane. We have Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, which is the Dungeons & Dragons crossover. We have Strixhaven, School of Mages, which is a wonderful little favourite set for artwork was New Capenna. Didn't even have... Yeah, Streets of New Capenna didn't have great cards in it, but yeah, the Art Deco style was great. Greatly utilised. Strixhaven is like a Hogwarts-esque wizarding school broken down into different multicoloured houses. Kaldheim, which was the Viking-themed like Valhalla and Mittenheim set. Kaladesh remastered, so they brought Kaladesh back to this format. Also, what was that one? That was the Baldur's Gate, which was meant to be released. The Alchemy Horizons came out at roughly the time that the Baldur's Gate set came out, if I remember correctly, which was meant to be released at the same time as Baldur's Gate 3, the game. But unfortunately, Larian hit a lot of problems, and so Baldur's Gate 3 got released a lot later than the Baldur's Gate set got released by Wizards. So people who play Baldur's Gate 3 and really enjoy Baldur's Gate 3, you can get a bunch of the main characters in Magic the Gathering, and a lot of them are legendary creatures, so you could build a commander deck with them. Anyway, Kaladesh Remastered. Kaladesh is a very technological advancement sort of progress through power energy themed set. Zendikar was the sort of explorer set in which there's a lot of like there was a whole big thing there of yes, Kaladesh had gremlins. That is a big notable point. Zendikar had a big story plot point in which the Eldrazi invaded, which is another big bads for the Magic the Gathering story through history have been the Phyrexians, the Eldrazi, and Nicol, who we got to see in the tutorial, even though he was a real pushover who just kind of gave up at the end in the tutorial because it can't make you actually fight Nicol seriously because otherwise he would win. Speaking of Nicol, they put Amonkhet Remastered, which is the plane that he became the antagonist for. He kind of took over, declared himself God King, and made an army of immortal skeleton warriors, known as the Eternals. Then we've got a couple of core sets. So Foundations is the newest version of a core set, but it is much more well-rounded, I would say. The core sets were good, but they were never anything super fancy, whereas Foundations has got a lot of very fancy things going on. I was going to say, I don't know how far down this goes. Okay, we're almost at the bottom. If it went through every Magic the Gathering set, I might have to stop here. But I'll do the last few. We're fine with that. Ikoria, Lair of Behemoths, was a pseudo-Godzilla crossover in that it was a lot of kaiju and big monsters battling, and like the humans were there, but kind of like we're amassing armies to stop the giant beasts invading our little settlements and cities. And more sort of trying to stay out of the way. There was also a actual Godzilla crossover in Ikoria. We then have Theros Beyond Death, which Theros itself is a Greek myth-inspired plane. So that was very fun. I do like Theros as a format, but unfortunately we've just got Beyond Death in this, which of the 4 sets based in Theros is one of the stronger ones, in all honesty, but original Theros was better, in my opinion. We then had Throne of Eldraine, which we had Wilds higher up. Wilds of Eldraine here is based on the same plane with like fairy tale, Grimm's fairy tales sort of thing. We had War of the Spark, which was the Nicol Bolas tries to take over the multiverse storyline. And the War of the Spark set was based on Ravnica, which we also have Ravnica Allegiance, and the Guilds of Ravnica. If you heard me mention some words when I was talking about the multicolour decks that you were like, I have no idea what these words are, those are the names of the Guilds of Ravnica, which are 10 dual-coloured types within Magic the Gathering. You could just call a deck like a white-blue deck. And everyone would know what you mean by saying a white-blue deck. But calling it an Azorius deck allows people to be more like people in the know, as it were, can sort of go, Azorius is the guild from Ravnica that is white-blue. And so if it's an Azorius deck, it's a white-blue deck, we can kind of work out what that does. Because white and blue have a specific kind of limited palette of ways of winning or ways of playing. Different sort of play styles for the different colour combinations. Then we have Original Ixalan. I kind of already touched on what Ixalan is and does. Another core set here. Another Ixalan set down here at the bottom with Rivals of Ixalan. I'm not sure why those are the other way round, because they got released the opposite way round. Rivals was like the subset for Ixalan, which was the main set. Much like how Guilds of Ravnica was the main set and Ravnica Allegiance was the subset. And then we've got Dominaria, which Dominaria for the longest time was just like the default, this is fantasy world, with a little bit of tech sprinkled in, but it's mostly like they have airships kind of tech. That's where the Brothers' War took place. That's where the Dominaria United storyline took place, and where the first little bits of the Phyrexian invasion were sort of noticed. And that seems to be all the sets that we've got on Arena. So that's quite a lot. There's quite a lot there to work